Hey, welcome. In this quick video, we are going to talk a little bit about the latest TIGTA report on the IRA funding, which was the Inflation Reduction Act funding from Congress to the IRS, and just some of the interesting things that we found in this latest report. So with me, I'm Mitch Piper, by the way. I'm the Director of Member Services here at the American Society of Tax Problem Solvers, and that's my phone ringing, and I'll turn that off. And alongside me today, we have Angeline Wiersbeck, who's an enrolled agent and certified tax resolution specialist. Also does a lot of teaching at ASTPS.
Yeah.
That's where you say hello.
Hi, everybody.
All right.
Hi,
right
everybody.
on. Okay. So let's share the screen. Let's get this report up there. And so this all started, and there were some things in this report that were not in any of the other previous reports. So they put this out there every quarter, and so this was the latest one. And so typically what I first look at is this little building here. What's that called?
Coliseum, maybe?
No, it's not. These are columns. It's not the Coliseum. I went to the Coliseum 2 years ago, I guess. Didn't look like this. Anyway, this, what I like to look at is I look at the enforcement. And you can see it's at 3.4% of the money that they've been allocated by Congress to use to collect taxes. So obviously, it's still very, very small percentage of it has been used. But I just decided to keep scrolling, and I wanted to go and look through and see what else they mentioned, and we got a lot of interesting things. So you want me to stop here first? On our
Yeah, sure. So actually, basically what is in the report is the IRS is talking about how they are going to allocate some of these funds, and some of the things that they originally thought they were doing with it have changed as stuff is going. Just because of their having shortfalls with their budget, and this is going to kind of play into some of the charts that we're going to look at later. They've been kind of reallocating funds to different places. So out of our IRA funding, originally what was set up for enforcement for 2024, they're planning to use like $1.048 billion dollars out of it, out of the total 7.2. So out of that, like kind of a good chunk of it is being used for enforcement. And as things go, we're going to look at the trends, but this is going to be the swing that the IRS is going to be using. More and more of the money is going to be put towards enforcement, because when they created the IRA, a lot of the money was set aside for enforcement, a good chunk of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been weird because I haven't been using much, right?
No, they really haven't. But on the other hand, if you look at what the IRS's state was prior to this funding, they're still working on very, very old systems. They're trying to modernize some of their computer systems, trying to do better things to outreach to taxpayers, trying to deal with some of those issues where people can't get through to the IRS, whether it be through phone or, building better online portals. So a lot of the stuff's been kind of pushed towards the technology side to get things started out. And now they're starting to swing into using more and more funds for enforcement. So as we can see here, this is a chart based off of the IRA spending. So out of the almost $58 million that they got, about 24 of it was earmarked. So about a little under 42% of the money has actually been earmarked towards enforcement. And they really haven't scratched the surface of their budget right now for that.
Yeah, you can see. And the crazy thing, though, is over the last year, we have started to see a huge increase in cases. Now, part of that is because we haven't really seen increases in like a decade. Right? It's always been a steady decline. Whereas then during COVID, obviously, there was virtually nothing.
Yeah.
So, any increase is going to seem kind of crazy. But so last year they spent $299 million.
Yep.
This year they're spending $1 billion. And by the way, this chart is new. I haven't seen it anywhere before. And it was just in the report, I believe, to Congress that they did. And so here, follow along with me because this is the crazy part. So $1 billion this year, $2.3 billion next year, $3.3 billion 2026, $4.5 billion 27, $6 billion 28, and $6.4 billion 2029. And actually, I'll show you how that number, they actually want that to be increased too. But you can see that there's a lot of blanks here. And the reason behind that is they're calling them cliffs because the funding is going to not reach past these dates. So it was supposed to originally reach to 2031, but Congress has not increased. They're basically having to use the IRA fundings to fund normal business operations for the IRS. So that's why the funds aren't going to reach the end date. So they're trying to request additional funding. And I believe that's our next stop on our adventure here. So in their 2025 budget request, they're putting in basically for another 10 years of funding. So here we can see what they want to do. So this is the money up here. This is the money that they already have. So just keep this in mind, right? So imagine if business is, 6 times busier than you are now.
Yeah.
That's going to be wild, right? But now let's go back down. So if they get this, which they're saying they are requesting $104 billion for the next 10 years, and that's going to bring in $341 billion in revenue. So that's not a bad deal.
Yeah.
But let's go back to our numbers, right? So this was actually adding on to 2029. So that actually bumps that up to like almost $8 billion. So we got that. Then we got 9.6. Then we have 11.6, 11.8, 12. And then maybe they're going to settle somewhere around 12 billion. But 12 billion?
Yeah. And the thing with it is if you look at the way the IRA funding is set up, they were using some of it for operational expenses and kind of getting everything like back up to snuff and moving up the technology side of things. But once they get that fixed and get a lot of that stuff updated, where are they going to turn and try and bring in some of the money for the government? They're looking at enforcement. So they're going to be doing more audits. They're going to be, looking at more collection cases, dealing with some of those non-filers, actively pursuing some of these issues that have kind of been backburnered because of staffing issues.
I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job at this because I'm not like being animated enough. But guys, most of you are going to probably still be in business 5 years from now, I hope, where they're going to be spending, $8 or $9 billion. That's 9 times more than they're spending right now, and they're going to be creating a lot of cases and also a lot of chaos, if you will, because the next thing we want. Well, actually, I'm sorry. We'll get to the chaos in a minute, and I'm talking about hiring and how many new people there are and how that's going to be continuing for quite a while. But Angeline, and we were prepared for this, and we were was scrolling through this and came down to this last bullet point on this chart of funding activity expenditures. And in the second column, enforcement, the only one who has anything is $1.4 million for transportation of things.
And I looked at this and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of money for seizures. And I ran it by Larry and we talked about it, and it's like, you know what, that gotta be what the transportation of things is. At first I was like, oh, it's, something for the good of, the IRS, and nope, that's their budget to go out and seize things and for, impounding automobiles and stuff and tagging assets. So they're
That's
going interesting because, if you look at the past reports, the IRS does very, very few seizures. So that's not one of the things that they, that's not a tool they utilize much. So, with this additional funding, that might be another area that they're, looking at actively pursuing some more.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I just love that it just says things. I don't know why, that just makes me laugh. But
well, that's what kind of caught my eye, because I'm like, what do they mean things? And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not us moving around computers, because everybody else is getting new assets and they're the only one with transportation of things. So
yeah, it's very strange. Anyway, if you happen to know what that is, comment down below and let us know. Now we're going on to the full-time employees. So you can see here under the enforcement, obviously they're going to be making huge investments, and we're just getting started. So last year, like Angeline mentioned, and I guess they're probably for the next couple of years, they're going to be investing a lot in the taxpayer services. So these are like call center employees, things like that, which makes sense, right? Because why do enforcement if there's no one there to answer the phone, to try to get the money from them? So makes sense. But you can see how we're building up the enforcement. So this year they're trying to hire 4,088 people, full-time employees, and that number just keeps going up and up and up and up. So 4 years from now, they're looking at going to be hiring over 30,000 enforcement professionals, which is, again, wild.
Yeah, it's huge, because if you look at historically what's been happening with the IRS, they've had like a staffing attrition over the years. They haven't really got any more funding. They haven't had the ability to hire new people. And what's been happening is people are getting to that age, they're retiring out, and they're losing the staff. Now they finally got the shot in the arm from Congress to say, hey, you know what? You can go out and you can basically replenish some of those jobs and also add to the staff for future activities.
Yep. So you can see this is in the taxpayer advocate report. So they're saying this is the 2023 report to Congress, where they said 18% of IRS employees are currently retirement eligible, which means they can leave anytime, and 37% of IRS employees are estimated to become eligible in the next 5 years. So they have a huge amount of people to hire just to maintain the same level of, well, I wouldn't actually, I guess you could argue it's not the same level of service, right? Because you're losing all of these knowledgeable, employees, and a lot of that institutional knowledge is disappearing.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of a hurdle for us practitioners with all the newbies that are coming in, but at least we kind of can see the big picture now and how they're trending for staffing. So as we're running into a few new people now, we're going to look down the road, 4 or 5 years ago, we're going to have tons and tons of new revenue officers, new revenue agents. So just, knowing your stuff, so that way when issues come up, you know how to respond to them, you know how to deal with them, is ever so important.
Yeah, because you can't, if you're going to do, IRS representation, and you're just going to take the word of whoever you're dealing with at the IRS that's the correct thing to do, like, your clients are going to get a bad deal.
Yeah.
You need to know the rules and the processes and the procedures, in most cases, better than the IRS does, to make sure your client gets a fair deal, and no matter what the situation is. So this is just the last thing I think we want to look at here is just the breakdown of this current year of what they're trying to do hiring wise. So obviously, I would say the big news here is heavy on the revenue agents. And what does that mean?
That means they're going to be looking at more audits. You're going to be dealing with more field audits. You're going to be dealing with more office audits. So bringing in those revenue agents, they're kind of, if you look at the big picture and the big trend, what they're kind of doing is they're tending to front load the tax liabilities by bringing in more people that are doing audits, trying to deal with compliance issues. And then once that aspect is kind of resolved, then they're kind of shifting focus and hiring more revenue officers and collection staff. So it does make sense. They're kind of, loading the funnel, as you can think, with, tax issues. And then once those issues kind of are there, they're working on getting staffing to, set up resolutions or resolve them or just flat out collect them. So as practitioners, be prepared for more audits over the next few years, and just be aware that that's going to be something that's going on. And even if you're just doing tax prep, you might want to think before you take certain aggressive positions on returns, because, there is more and more revenue agents coming in there that, you're going to be more likely to get your client audited.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting stuff, if you ask me.
Oh, for sure. And, and this is an area of practice where, it's kind of quelled during COVID just because their IRS wasn't sending out notices. The world didn't know what to do with, having revenue officers come to your door anymore, or any of that stuff. Now everything is kind of calming back down, and it's showing. Like, now they have the funds to go out and, start pursuing some of these things that have been set aside or that haven't been looked at. So, I think we're just going to see a ton of growth in this area of resolution.
I have to agree with you. And obviously lots of audits. If you primarily do collections work, most audit cases end up turning it, well, maybe not most, but many audit cases turn out to be collection cases when they can't pay what they owe at the end of the audit. So
yeah, and another thing is too, like, they just set up the new free e-file system, so people are also going to be taking positions on their returns that aren't right, So you might be getting more people for collections and more people for audits from that as well.
Yep. Well, I think that's all we had to share, but let us know what you think. We think it's pretty exciting news. Good time to get into collections and our IRS representation. And if you're new and you have never done anything before, check out our ASTPS Accelerator program, where you can learn everything you need to know to get started in tax resolution. This is definitely a long-term investment for you if you want to get into this area. As you can see, the amount that the IRS is going to be investing in collections is going to be pretty much proportional to the number of cases that are going to be out there that people are going to need help. So it's an excellent time to get involved. You haven't missed anything just yet. But if you wait too much longer, if you put this off for too long, you're going to let other people carve out their piece of the pie, and you might just miss out. So check out the ASCPS Accelerator, and we have membership, we have certification, lots of stuff. So if you're interested in tax resolution, go check out astps.org, and otherwise we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.